From the way Joel's numbers just don't cut it this year, to Giannis, the absolute beast who should have won it instead, here are all the reasons why Embid didn't deserve the MVP this season, starting with how his numbers just don't impress. I mean, let's talk about Embid's stats compared to the two runner-up MVP candidates, Giannis and Jokic. No one can deny that Embid is a strong player, both on offense and defense, but a look at the numbers shows his competitors outclass him in some key aspects. For one, Embid has the worst stats of the three when it comes to passing, with both Giannis and Jokic averaging a higher number of assists per game. That's not all. In terms of pure shot making, Embid might have the superior jumper, but Jokic is better in terms of pure points conversion, not just from the rim, but from within the paint and at the mid-range point. That's three separate areas where he could outclass the current MVP. Sure, you could make the argument that Embid is the better overall defensive player, but let's be honest here. When has defensive skill ever decided the MVP? In fact, if you look at the more advanced numbers, Jokic is the better rebounder, which is an essential trait for any defensive player. In fact, looking at the numbers, you could argue that there was definitely something outside of basic numbers crunching at work here, like the fact that he basically won because people really wanted him to. People love to root for the underdog, especially in sports, but there are few underdog stories more attractive than Embid's. For years, the 76ers have been the bridesmaids of the MVP trophy, seemingly banned from becoming the pride, and it looks like voters took note of that. In fact, on a recent Hoop Collective podcast, 3 guests with MVP voting rights discussed the idea of the big man as the MVP, and the consensus seemed to be that they just really wanted Embid to have the win. In fact, they even admitted that statistically, there's not much that sets Embid far apart from the other candidates, both offensively and defensively. The thing is, Embid has been actively campaigning for the MVP trophy for a long time, whether he would like to admit it or not. He's conducted entire interviews with Sports Illustrated where he's claimed that he doesn't care about getting the MVP, while simultaneously doing his best to make his case for it. He even directly made comments about Jokic's chances for the MVP, while once again trying to act like he doesn't really care. Of course, there's nothing particularly bad about this. You could even argue that it's nice to see someone who wants the MVP so badly, but it's hard to say it's 100% deserved. Of course, Nuggets fans have had quite a bit to say on social media. There's one thing about NBA fans, that their hands are never far from the Twitter app. The Embid MVP announcement caused an instant shock on the Bird app, with fans of Jokic and Giannis immediately voicing their protests. Some have even gone so far as to say that Joel won his MVP through dramatics. Yeah, they're saying he won because he's a big crybaby. In fact, they've started calling it a sympathy award, and have been ridiculing fans of Embid, saying that the trophy shouldn't count because it was the pressure from his fans that ultimately influenced the decision, rather than an actual, rational judgment from the voters themselves. This narrative was especially bolstered by Embid's MVP speech that involved the man crying over his award after a series of tearful thank yous. Nuggets fans are especially less than impressed, stating that it's annoying how he's been campaigning through sympathy tactics, rather than just letting his play do the talking for him. To be fair, if I were a Nuggets fan, I'd be pretty upset too, given the amazing season that Jokic has been having. Now, it's really hard to say that any one player's performance can put them leagues above others in terms of the MVP race, but Jokic's stats really do speak to just how well he's been playing all season. In terms of pure percentages, Jokic leaves Embid in the dust. You can see it from literally every part of the court. Jokic's mid-range shooting comes in at 52.3% and 72.8% from within 5 feet of the basket. These stats are either significantly better or almost exactly the same as Joel Embid's, and showcase just how much of an offensive powerhouse the Europeans are in the league. And boy, oh boy, have you seen the way the guy dishes out assists? Dime for dime, there is not a single player in the NBA right now who passes the ball even a little like Jokic does, showing just how valuable he can be in any aspect of his team's offense. He's no slouch on the defense side either, and is a prolific rebounder for his team. Actually, that's an understatement. The guy is the first person to average a 25-point triple-double while simultaneously shooting 63% from the field. Wow, talk about a crazy stat sheet. Of course, those numbers aren't a true reflection of the best pro-Jokic MVP argument. The fact that no player in the NBA impacts their team as much as he does, it's almost hilarious to see just how much more effective the Nuggets are with their star player around. With him on the court, the Nuggets managed to outscore their opponents by 12.8 points, coming off 100 possessions. That's a higher number than both other MVP candidates. This particular stat is evidence of just how much impact Jokic has on his team. When he plays, the Nuggets are one of the best teams in the NBA. They absolutely rip through their competition, working as a unit to outclass their opponents night after night, and Jokic is very much the centerpiece of that unit. He leads the team in multiple stats, including points, assists, and rebounds. When he plays, the Nuggets win an insane 71% of their games, a significantly higher number than Embid's 65%. It's pretty clear that Jokic is the kind of player who can turn an entire franchise's fortunes around, bringing in wins when nobody expected them, and consistently acting as a championship-level leader in order to lead them to victory. Fans argue that these are the exact kinds of traits that you want out of a league MVP, and I agree. The man's already won 2 back-to-back for crying out loud. Well, those back-to-back MVPs might just be the problem. Let's be real, people who win all the time are kind of boring. No one's ever going to forget the hate train against the Warriors, back when it looked like they could sweep through the league with their eyes closed. Well, it looks like the curse of success reared its ugly head in Jokic's direction as well, because one of the biggest reasons he was snubbed for the MVP might just be that people didn't want to see him win a third time. From the get-go, it looked like every argument for the MVP race has been unfairly stacked against him. People talk a big game about defense, but and let's be perfectly honest here, no one cares about defense in the MVP race. I mean, what defense did Stephen Curry play the year that he won, or Russell Westbrook? MVPs are won based on stories, and people weren't into the Jokic story. Having someone win the MVP 3 times makes the league look like it's becoming stagnant and predictable. The 2 worst phrases you can use when talking about the world of sports. Steph didn't win 3 MVPs in a row either, and you could argue it was for the exact same reason. It's much more entertaining to see an underdog rise up than to watch someone who has already established themselves keep the throne. Of course, all of this isn't even mentioning the other MVP candidate that deserves the award. Let's not forget how Giannis set the league on fire this season. It's impossible to argue that Giannis is anything but the best player in the NBA right now. For years, the Greek Freak has looked absolutely unstoppable, racking up accolade after accolade and turning the Bucks into a franchise that acts as a genuine title contender every year. The guy's the modern face of the NBA, a two-way player that can do just about anything on the court, from shooting the 3 to dishing sweet dimes to block shots with his absolute monster height and wingspan. He moves across both ends of the floor so fast he looks like a white and green blur, and his stat sheets reflects that. Giannis has had one of the best seasons of his career. He's averaging the same field goal percentage as he did in his MVP season and has upped the ante in other areas, offering career-high numbers in terms of points per game and rebounds. Under his leadership, the Bucks have been the best team in the league this season, having the best record in the entire NBA while playing in the most stacked conference in the entire NBA. Even when compared to Embid point for point, the difference is pretty much negligible. And you could even argue that Giannis ends up making more impact for his team, making his snub all the more heartbreaking. Well, folks, from Giannis's record-setting domination to the way Embid's numbers just don't cut it this year, those were all the reasons Embid didn't deserve the MVP award.